Okay, we are live streaming.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. This is Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022. It's 8:30 a.m. and this is a workshop meeting of the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners. I'm Chair Claire Hall. Commissioner Doug Hunt is also with us. Commissioner Katie Jacobson isn't able to join us this morning. However, she will be watching the recording of this meeting. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube and will also be recorded, available for anybody's viewing later. So we have 4 presentations coming up today from members of our management team. And without further ado, I'll turn things over to our county administrator, Tim Johnson.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Today we're talking organizational enhancements. Why? Upon my arrival, I initiated interviews and appointments with each one of the members of the management team, both direct reports and elected officials, and sought their input. In that regard, what was fascinating was a series of common threads that had been expressed to me relative to these organizational enhancements that they felt were tantamount to the effective and efficient operation of the county. Casey, if you'll go through the PowerPoint, I'll be much obliged. We're on page 3 on under identification. Thank you. Within those, there were 3 key categories. One was identified as hiring and retention of employees, and that was appeared to be the most, from a heuristic perspective, the most significant of the 3. The second one was related to a budget document itself and the budget process, which was also very important for me to hear, because upon my arrival, I was initiated into the fire by having to address the issue of the budget. The third one, and near dear to my heart, is one where over my career I've been pretty successful with in looking at the monetization of services and subsequent acquisition of revenues for counties or cities. And so these were the 3 key issues that had this common thread. And as such, the team, which I'd like to take a moment and thank, next slide, please, as shown here for those who are watching, played a key role in bringing forth the today's research and recommendations. And they have divided themselves into 3 teams to look at these 3 separate categories. So you'll hear from them momentarily. Next slide, please. So being privy to this information moving forward, I think they did a tremendous job in the context of being able to identify the solution set and a series of recommendations. In the context of that, one of the things that was truly clear as they proceeded was that they took into consideration the county's mission statement, which I think has done a very good job of standing the test of time. And my compliments to this organization over its decades of service. It is proven to be a component of success. I think there was one other thing that I defined and shared with the team, that as department directors and elected officials, maybe it was subliminal to them and their efforts, but they have created a motivational culture. And there's a couple examples. One that resonated so much with me is from Roy Kenyon at our Public Works Roads Division, where he had talked to me at length about how they go about their hiring process in the context of finding the right fit for the county and for that team. And I hope that he talks a little bit about that today, because that is one of those hidden gems that we have in this organization. And to find motivational culture in an organization like this is really insightful, and it leads to opportunities where we need to take this organization next. So with that, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to follow up, Chair, at the end with next steps when they're all done. But I would like to remind to our presenters this morning that the chair has a 5-minute mark form, and she will be utilizing that when you come up on your 15-minute mark on your 20-minute presentation. So with that, let's go back and start. And I think our first entity up, Casey, is Operation Great Hire.
So for the record, if I may note that if you see me wince, it's because I have bruised ribs. At my age, I managed to fall down the stairs, and I'm fine, except sometimes when I breathe, it hurts a little bit. So if I wince, it has nothing to do with your presentations.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
And if everybody would introduce themselves for the record when they speak.
Curtis Landers, Lincoln County Sheriff.
Jane Romero, HHS Health and Human Services Director.
Cinda Bruce, Lincoln County Council.
Roy Kenyon, Lincoln County Public Works Director.
So our committee was Operation Great Hire, and we have met, I think, 4 or 5 times. And as we began to look at the notion of how to hire great staff, we began to realize it wasn't really just about hiring. It needed to certainly be about hiring, but looking at the hiring process and then significantly figuring out a strategy to retain great staff, because the cost of turnover is high. So as you can see on the PowerPoint, if you want to go to the next slide, these were the 3 areas we focused on: recruitment, hiring process, and retention. Next slide, Casey. And this is the methodology we used. We did a lot of brainstorming. We looked at the available research, and at the end of our presentation, there is a bit of a bibliography that references the sources that we looked at. And then among ourselves, we voted. So basically what you are going to see are the recommendations that got 3 or more votes, but I would like to just show you our worksheets. You can see there are quite a few recommendations that were generated. We brainstormed among ourselves. In my case, I even brainstormed among the HHS staff, our workforce development committee, our supervisors and managers, and of course the division directors. So next slide. And then we can begin with the recommendations. So these are the items that got 3 or more votes. Next slide. So starting with recruitment, we felt that we needed to have a formal written recruitment plan. And quite frankly, I need to produce one. So it would be beneficial to HHS to have one. Next slide, please. And we, out of the gate, we thought that we needed to look at outreach. So we participate in job fairs that other people host, but we feel that perhaps we should initiate them as a countywide organization, and maybe in partnership with some of the other organizations that have like functions. For example, for us, working in partnership with the Siletz Community Clinic or Samaritan Healthcare to look at healthcare outreach, or going on site with the high schools and the colleges to do job fairs. And then maybe working a little more intentionally with OSU and our community college to expand degree options relative to the types of positions that we have here. We've done that some, but perhaps a more orchestrated effort would benefit us. Next slide. With regard to job advertising, We felt that we needed to more intentionally post vacancies on websites that advertise to a more diverse population. I know when we had our diversity training among the MTEAM members, we learned that there are in fact sites that are more targeted to more diverse folks. So we felt like we should look at that and more intentionally post there. Also, we felt that we needed to strategize about using LinkedIn and other analytics to push our job notices out to people who may qualify for them. I think many of us get those notices from LinkedIn about jobs that are available. We get postcards in the mail and so forth. So we should take a page out of that playbook and do that as well. We talked about targeting recruitment for more experienced personnel and the publications and job sites they may be looking at, just in recognition of the fact that housing costs are expensive here, thinking that people who aren't quite ready to retire, have 5 or 10 more years they want to work, but who might also have the resources to afford housing in the area. So we wanted to target those folks. And we also talked about making our job descriptions a little more inviting. I think when you go onto other sites where jobs are listed, sometimes they launch with videos and a description of the area versus here's what your job is. Next slide, please. And let me just invite my fellow committee members to chime in.
We'll jump in here soon.
Okay. For example, we also thought we should highlight our strengths. We have learned that, thanks to Mr. Johnson, that Oregon is the best state in the United States to work in. We are
Wow.
#1. Our overall score is 85.68 out of 100. We are 9th or 67.34 in terms of wage policies. We are first in terms of worker protection, and we are first in terms of right to organize. And I learned late last week that Oregon is 6th in terms of the best state to work in as a nurse. So we might as well highlight that. Next
Sure.
slide, please. So we talked about using energetic videos to market Lincoln County, reflecting on why move here, the recreational opportunities, the beauty, the things I just reviewed, the state ranking. And we know that some of our competitors are doing this. We also thought that if we could develop these kinds of videos, that when you log on to our job site, you could just immediately go to those videos. And we saw a few that we thought were just really motivational. And we also thought it made sense to create videos that reflect the culture of each department. So maybe an overarching video of Lincoln County itself, but then more specific to each department. So for example, the things that might attract somebody to work for my department might not attract somebody to work for Roy's department or Cinda's department or Sheriff Lander's department. Next slide. And we talked a lot about the interview process, and I think this is one of the things that Roy will be talking about more. We've learned from the literature that high quality applicants are a lot more focused on what the interview process looks like. We've learned that the behavior of the recruiters, of the people doing the interviewing, and the degree of warmth that is shared has an impact on the performance of the folks interviewing. And we've also learned that applicants, the beliefs that they bring to an interview affect their performance. And I don't know if you are aware, but when we have an interview, essentially they begin somewhat in the same way, which is, hi, welcome here. We all introduce ourselves.
Mhm.
We say, we are going to ask you questions. And at the end, if you have questions, you may ask them. So there's not a lot of warmth in the structure that we have. And I understand that there has been some creativity from other departments, and I believe Mr. Pinion will talk about that.
Yes, as Mr. Johnson brought up, we had a conversation about what, and this was specifically for road department, road crew hiring process. And yes, we all do or did do the kind of the oral interview in what I would consider a walk-in closet. And it was very dry. You could tell that, basically the applicant most time was very uncomfortable, that you weren't really getting the true value out of that individual. And so we kind of restructured things to where in our environment, we actually still have the oral interview, but we also have some separate outside testing stations that allows our applicant to be in a more comfortable environment. Usually it's outside. We've actually had it raining, and so we provide rain gear, but I mean, those are the kind of things that you have to expect with our type of work. And it's been very intriguing about how much more personal information can come out of these workstations where it's a one-on-one. I have a supervisor who's, watching them do a certain activity, but at the same time, they're having a conversation. And we didn't realize kind of where we weren't being successful in our oral interview process until these people started coming back and reporting back to us as far as what information they got out of these individuals. And it was actually shocking that we couldn't get 2 words out of some of these applicants. They were just froze up, get them outside, get them in a more comfortable environment. And they actually felt comfortable enough to discuss things, and usually it was just an open conversation. So it gave us a better insight into what that applicant was all about. And what I was talking with Mr. Johnson about was originally, and I've been with the county long enough that I've hired almost everybody that works over at Public Works. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I have always been very critical of our hiring process because you're always trying to hire someone that wants to retire with your organization. And for the most part, we're known for longevity in public works, but there's always those hires that just don't really pan out and they stay for a short period of time, which for us is 4 or 5, 6 years, and then they move on. And then it's like, well, why is that? Well, the reality of it is that although they had all the skills you were looking for, they just didn't fit the culture. And in our line of work, some of it is in situations that are not nice. Maybe it's in the middle of a rainstorm, or you're wading up to your waist in a ditch of water, or whatever it is. And it's really important that those people that you work with are willing to do the same, and that you have that kind of that team feeling. And so, although it's nice to have the skills, we kind of went away from that being the sole focus of the interview to find out what they can do. It's more about who they are and what we can train them to do. And so we've really shifted our whole focus to the point where we're looking for individuals that will blend in and be part of the road department culture. And we found that because then when they come in, they feel comfortable and they kind of gel with the people as individuals, and they tend to enjoy the work more. They tend to be more productive. And in our environment, we can train anybody to do almost anything. And so the training is actually second to the actual, I don't want to use the word personality because it's deeper than that. It's almost like we have this gut feeling, and I've told all of my supervisors during the interview process that trust your gut. Even though this person is checking all the boxes, if there's something that tells you that they're not going to be a good fit, let us know. Trust your gut. And then in reverse, if there is somebody who isn't checking any of the boxes, but you just have that feeling that they would be a plug into the crew, they would blend right in, and the crew would be accepting of that individual, let us know, because that's something that we really need to look at. And so that's kind of the process that we go through with hiring a new individual. And actually, we're going to be interviewing for a new entry-level road department individual next week. And so we'll play that out again and see how it works for us.
I think the traditional interview process, what we're trying to say, is kind of gone, especially with the new generations. And I know that and just to kind of follow up with what Roy's saying on Arlo, we do ride-alongs, we do jail tours, we actually get the applicants work in with the people they're going to be working with. They're not going to work directly with me, they're not going to work directly with Lieutenant Russell's other lieutenants, they're going to work with them in that area. One thing we did, just real quickly, and then we can probably move on. We set up kind of an open house day. I don't know if you call it a job fair or not. We set open house. This wasn't for applicants, where people met over at our multi-purpose building over at the impound area. We had music playing. We set up the ORPAT, which is our physical test. We had a grit test. We had HR there. We had several deputies. We brought in one of the food trucks, and people showed up, and we're conversing with the deputies they're going to be working with. trying out the, see if they could actually do the physical, actually applying. And we actually got 2 people from that one little setup that we did. So just an example of that.
Next slide. We wanted to recommend that we institute a program of paying our existing employees for finder's fees, perhaps 50% and higher, 50% once the new employee hits the 6-month mark. We know some of our competitors are doing this, and we know from the literature that this is a good source of recruitment. We also thought kind of a low-hanging thing we could do is create an electronic county bulletin board, and this would help address the housing issue. So that the members of county staff are selling a house to move to another house, moving out of an apartment, know of somebody who's moving out of an apartment or so forth, that it could be posted on this electronic bulletin board so that we could, in essence, share that information with not only new hires, but existing county staff, and maybe do other things like help have a place where people can indicate an interest in rideshare, carpooling, especially for folks who live over in the valley and come all the way over here to work. Next slide, please. And we also thought we might want to take a more frequent look at our salary ranges, and more specifically, change how we compare ourselves when we're looking at salary ranges. I believe the current practice is to look at like-sized counties. And just for reference here, Oregon is the 9th most expensive state for living, and our county is the 13th most expensive state. So we thought so we thought it made sense to compare ourselves with like counties. So next slide, Casey. This is 2019 data, so it doesn't, some of it's going to look a little dated, but you can see if the United States has a score of 100 in terms of cost of living, Lincoln County compares with that at 99.2. Oregon is over 113. But if you look at the median housing costs in our county in 2019, it was $371,400, or almost 25% above the median housing price in the country. Similarly, though, if you look at our median household income in 2019, it was $43,000 versus 57, almost 58,000 in the States. And so if you look at Lane, Lynn, and Marion with regard to overall cost of living, median home prices, these counties seem more comparative to us. Next slide, please. And so just briefly on the hiring process, we thought we should streamline. We should look for opportunities to streamline the hiring process. I know we talked some with you, Commissioner Hunt, just about the time involved in going from we have a vacancy to we have somebody hired. And there are other processes within HR that we might want to see if we can streamline. Among them, posting the positions, perhaps posting them as soon as a resignation is announced. Maybe looking at whether or not background checks can be done more efficiently. Another idea that we posted here is hosting paid internship positions. We have the ability to do that within HHS, but we also know that if we can find somebody who will work with us in an internship capacity, there's a great probability that they will stay with us and take a position with us. Next slide, please. And then we talked some about retention. How do we retain the great people that we hire? So next slide. We talked about culture and benefits. So one of the things that we have a great mission, but we don't really have core values. A lot of organizations do, and I know within HHS we have them, but there do not appear to be overarching core values within the county. We talked about offering childcare support for our staff. I have lost 2 staff since I've been here, which is just a little over a year because of lack of child care. We thought we should encourage one-on-one meetings with supervisors consistently across the county. Look at strategies to develop a very thorough staff wellness program. Among the ideas presented were full benefit coverage. Right now, employees pay 10%. So we wanted to put that on the table. We like the idea of directors having the ability to give bonuses to staff for exemplary work. And we thought it made sense to interview county employees who stay with the county. We certainly interview employees when they leave, but what about the employees that stay? What is their story? And finally, I think we talked about some formal way to support those who are maybe a little tired of the job that they have, are ready to move on, want a new skill set, to help them move somewhere else within the county rather than losing them entirely. And I think next slide, please. I think that pretty much wraps up our presentation, only to note that our presentation has been set against the backdrop of pictures from our county. So what the heck, why not put those out there so that people can see the beauty of this county when they're looking at jobs? I will tell you personally, when my husband made the decision to move west, it was because I linked onto a website in Northern California that had pictures of their coastline, and we were like, yeah, let's do this. So, and then I think if you keep going, Casey, you'll get to the bibliography, I think, that we use, if anybody is, yeah, interested. So I think with that, we can wrap up and see if you have any questions.
I don't have any immediate questions. I just really want to thank you for the breadth and the thoroughness of your research. I see a lot of worthwhile ideas here, some that can be implemented almost immediately, others that will take some time and thought and money, but I think this is really helpful, and I look forward to reviewing your report more thoroughly. Commissioner Hunt?
Yes, I would agree. I think a lot of great ideas. Some of the ideas have been tossed around. I think it's nice to see a group that's gotten together and provided some cohesion to those ideas and brought some new ones to the table. I guess I'll just make a couple of observations. When you talk about job advertising, I remember former Commissioner Thompson used to say, we ought to advertise in Field and Stream because that's what the people that come here like to do. Again, that's kind of a tidbit that's been tossed around. Have to get a chuckle out of Director Kenyon's comments. I remember when I was in the banking industry, I said, I want to hire somebody that can get along with people. I can teach a teller to count money. Again, I think an idea that's kind of been tossed around. I guess one of the questions I have is clarify how you would balance or think we should balance the idea of experience versus tenure. In other words, if you have somebody that's really good and we are able to hire them for 2 years, is that good? Or do we say, gee, this person's really good, but we want them to stick around for 5 years?
I could take a stab at this from our perspective. It's nice to have that balance of different people with the experience and not. We seem to, within the sheriff's office, specifically the patrol division, got really low in experience. And so bringing some individuals that we currently are working on that has some experience level is beneficial to the entire organization, but it's also extremely beneficial that we don't have the long training time with somebody coming from another agency that has that experience. They don't have to attend, it's a very short field training program that they have to do. They don't have to go to 4-month academy and the 15, 16 weeks that they ride along with somebody. So we get them in the door quicker. So if they're here 3 years, to us, we did well. Okay. Now, somebody that is just starting, obviously the value, the investment you put with them initially, you want to get a lot longer investment with that.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. It's, how quickly can that person truly be effective and offset the potential shortness, I guess. Right. So the last question I have is, there are 4 of you here, and I know the DA's office has a big challenge with hiring and retention. Was the district attorney able to participate in your discussions?
She was not, although she did have Liz Howard come and participate in one of the meetings that we had and was active in voting on the recommendations that went forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. And let's bring forward our next team. And Tim, do you want to introduce them or just? Okay, enhancements for the budget and its process. If you folks would please come forward, and we all know each other here, but again, just introduce yourselves for the record. Who knows? 10 years from now, somebody may look back on this recording and say, who were all those creative and innovative folks?
So we'll start down here.
Eli Adam, County Surveyor.
David Collier, Human Resources Director. Todd Richmond, IT Director.
Dana Jenkins, County Clerk.
Jane Welch, County Treasurer and Tax Collector.
So thanks for letting us come up and do this. Appreciate it. We are slide minimalists. So just bear with us while we do a bunch of talking. We wanted to start out with basically what we have boiled down to the roles of everybody in the budget. The budget is, for lack of a better word, the backbone of all the work we do here. It's the number story of Lincoln County. So the Board of Commissioners obviously oversees and monitors and adopts the county budget. Management team, elected officials and appointed directors review it annually and review all the functions and services by the county government. Budget officer, who is our finance director, plans, organizes, and schedules steps through the adoption of the annual budget. And the budget committee, comprised of the Board of Commissioners and 3 appointed lay citizens, approves the budget. All county department managers prepare an individually budget for their departments. So next slide, please. Next one, please. So you'll see here, we have a diagram. This is really for reference. It talks about our budget development flow chart now. January, February, the Board of Commissioners give the county department guidelines. March and February, we reviewed the functions and services. March and April, the budget officer and the board commissioners prepare and propose the budget document. April and May, the budget committee convenes, public hearings are held, the budget is approved for recommendation adoption by the Board of Commissioners. It's a big part right there. And then May and June, the budget officer and the Board of Commissioners make minor adjustments. Within statute, you guys are allowed to adjust a certain amount without going back to the budget committee. And then year round, there's changes and updates and stuff, because it's really a living document as we go through the year. It's not static, things happen. So we broke this into two portions. First, the budget process, which is important and has changed over the last few years. Some of us on this group have been here long enough to remember sort of what we consider the golden age of the budget process. And we'd like to discuss making some changes and moving back into that golden age of the budget where we worked really well together. The budget process really needs to start, from our perspective, with a budget message from the Board of Commissioners to us, not to the public, setting the priorities, setting the numbers that we're trying to hit. Instead of us coming to a meeting later and being presented with, okay, now we need to cut, now we've got money to spend, whatever it may be. We really want that budget message from the board to set that tone at the beginning of the process as early as possible, preferably in January. We're looking at extending the process a little bit. In January, we'll prepare a timeline of events and secure an offsite meeting location. The meetings are important. I'll talk to them a little bit later. February, departments prepare the first round of budgets to be submitted. And then in March, the MTEAM and the commissioners meet offsite for a 2-day, if necessary, full day meeting to determine a balanced budget and decision on additional department requests. Now, that seems really simple. And it is, but what we really need to talk about is participation and vision and leadership. So those things really need to be at the forefront of our process. If we do not get a budget message from the board that gives us things to look for and numbers to hit, or if the M team is not willing to participate in the full day meetings and come up with a budget, the whole system sort of falls apart, right? Our goal was to maintain a non-competitive budget process. Some of you may have experience in other jurisdictions or even here before the MTEAM was put together, where department heads come to the budget committee, present their budget, and then defend it and ask for their extras all at that meeting, instead of presenting the budget committee with a finalized, or I shouldn't say finalized, but a balanced budget that includes all of our priorities. And when we get competitive, everybody but the sheriff loses. So, we really want to make sure that we're using a collegiate process, not a competitive process. We really want to make sure that MTEAM meetings, we come up with the budget, right? We have historically, in the last few years, found, we took a long time to come up with this term, alternative funding sources for our budget to meet your required reserves. And we need to move that earlier in the into the process. So instead of March, us going through and coming up with a budget, and the commissioners and historically Wayne, but Administrator Johnson taking an unbalanced budget, performing extra work on it, and bringing back a balanced budget to the MTEAM and then to the board. We'd like to see that alternative funding sources discussed earlier on in the process. So by the time we get to that meeting in March, that we are really looking at the total sum of the money we have to allocate, instead of doing our best and then hoping that we can fill in the extra pieces as we move along. We understand that the last couple of years, the process has been hamstrung by COVID and fires and new directors. And I mean, it's been a rough couple of years for us on a budget cycle, but really want to make sure that we get the participation. And we don't have a suggestion necessarily, but we'd like to recommend a stick or a carrot to get that participation. You guys are the purse strings. The checkbook, you hold all the power when it comes to the money. So it's, in some fashion, you guys should be able to get people to come to those meetings and participate.
We really talked about, on our slide here, we say essential, and I'll say that I kind of threw that out. Initially, we had mandatory, and we didn't want to maybe be quite as harsh, but I think back to March when the M team got together at our planning session, and some of the rules that we came up with, and it really is being a team. And again, so it's essential for all of us to be there, because if one of us or two of us aren't there, you're missing part of the team. I mean, again, if sports analogy, if you go out and you're trying to play without a pitcher, you're kind of in trouble, or a catcher, or so sure.
Yeah. And then once the budget is balanced by the M team and the Board of Commissioners. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna hit that M team. The M team is available at the first meeting. Of course, we'd be available for subsequent meetings and questions and whatnot, but essential, not mandatory, but essential attendance on that first meeting to come up, not necessarily present the board, but say this, present a small statement to the commission or the budget committee, and then be available for questions that first meeting. So we're covering all the bases. Everybody has access to everybody, and things are smooth. And again, this only works if we're all on the same page and we're all doing things the same way. It will not work if I, for example, get turned down for something in the M team discussion, and I bring that back to the board during our budget meetings. That becomes a competitive process again, and nobody wins when we do that. So Before I go into the budget document, were there any questions?
Go ahead,
No, I have a
Commissioner.
couple of questions since you've given me the opportunity, and I'll start right there. If a balanced budget is brought before the Board of Commissioners and you didn't get what you want, how do you feel about not having the opportunity to make an appeal directly to the Board of Commissioners? In other words, is that not stifling constructive, hopefully constructive conversation?
Well, we really pushed to have that constructive conversation at the MTEAM level. Of course, anybody can come to the Board of Commissioners and say anything they want. But we think if the MTEAM can come together and work as a team, and which we use 2017 as a benchmark for this, we can really have those discussions and find alternatives for most of our decision packets when we're working as a team. Instead of me coming and saying, hey, you guys didn't give me my person, I need my person. I make that at the M team, and I make that discussion to you guys, and you with the M team prioritize those discussions and then decide what needs to be pushed to next year. Those don't necessarily have to be permanent, right? And we do have other funding sources that we can look at, other budgets that aren't just in the general fund, to try and fill some of those budget needs, like we did this year with ARPA. We won't always have ARPA, but there will be other things like ARPA that come up that will give us the ability to fill in some of those gaps as we need. We just have to be patient, vigilant, and pay attention. So.
Go ahead.
No, I'm done, sir.
Okay, well, I think that's a good answer, but it kind of is a good segue to the comment about participation and leadership. To me, it's a little bit like pushing on a rope. I can tell people that, gee, it's really good for you to be active in participation and participate. On the other hand, if those directors or other leaders don't have the initiative on their own to want to be a part of that process, it's a little bit hard for a commissioner to say, you really need to be there or else. That doesn't work. So,
right.
I think the reason I bring that up now is I think that's part and parcel to your answer too, to my first question. A lot of the directors certainly, and I think you're a good example, are willing to negotiate, discuss, and find a compromise that is a solution. I'm not sure that's the case with everyone.
True.
So again, I think that's a good use, it's a good process, but I think the way that it becomes even more effective is to have directors that are involved and are good leaders. So the last comment I'll make is that you referred to the prior years as the golden age. I think in recognition of Dana, we should have called it the silver age.
All right, good questions. I'm going to move on to the budget document. We actually spent a lot of time on the budget document, going back and forth. Our initial discussion is who's the audience and what it's used for. The audience is actually twofold. We are on this slide. There we go. The county and the public, or details versus overview. We really wanted to look at this document and break it into two and say, one of these documents is for general consumption, right? And it's not just consumption, it's accessible information, it's charts and graphs, it's our story that we have decided to publish for the public, and then providing them the numbers in the other document to back up that story. So we found Lane County does this. We found some other agencies that have done this. We would have, what did we call it? Not an executive summary, but basically a summary of the budget that highlights the things that were successfully paid for and completed last year, the things that we're going to be doing this year with the funding, what our focuses are. Of course, it would include a message from the Board of Commissioners. It might include messages from major departments like the Sheriff's Office or HHS. And then we're looking at a smaller document that we can then have a marketing or publishing company actually develop for us, not something that we've done in-house, but something that's really designed by people who understand how to make people read the document. Because we're really trying to get that story out there with this document instead of providing a stack of numbers and say, go at it. You know, the idea, just as a more specific example, let's pick IT. Let's say we upgrade 600 computers this year, so we would put that in there. And then what we would do is that at the end of that article, we would then direct the user to the numbers in the other document. So they have the entire picture, but if you're only interested in what the highlights are, you can get that from the document. And we thought it was very important for somebody outside the county to develop that document for us. Maybe after a couple of years, we get some templates, we get some starting points, and we can bring that back in-house, maybe give that to the PIO or somebody. But at first, we really want somebody else to help us develop that document, because it's really, I won't say that our document is wrong in any way. It's perfect for what it was intended for. We're just trying to use it for something else. The other thing that we talked slightly about was potentially, making that document readily available or mailing that document out to the public as something that we want people to read. Right now we take if they want it, they can have it tagged on our budget. Yep, it's publicly available, it's free, it's on the website. But we really want to put it out there and be like, look at what we're doing. Give us the feedback that we want on the stories that we're providing. So that's it. We did leave a little extra for questions. There was a couple of things that did come up that I did want to address that we did not include as recommendations. The first was a 2-year budget cycle. We looked at that. We found one county in Oregon doing it, Benton County. I reached out to my counterpart there, did not hear back. Oddly, we don't talk to Benton County much. It's really weird. But we brought some people in that had done that to talk to the committee, and we just didn't think it was the right time. What we wanted to really see was a solid process on a 1-year budget, and then we can come back and we can have those discussions about whether we're going to do a second year or a 2-year budget.
Could I leap in here?
Yes, sir.
I have through the years had conversations with various Benton County commissioners about the 2-year process, and they're very positive about it. I agree that we probably shouldn't immediately leap toward that, but consider it as a goal. He said everybody seems to appreciate the time they save in alternate years, and also feel that it puts more responsibility on the electeds and directors and managers to manage their budget, throughout the 2-year cycle, that they do have a short check-in on the alternate years, but said for the most part, people there really seem to be very positive about that. I'm glad you took a look at it.
Yeah, we came back. I'm from education. Before I came here, I worked at the university, and we lived on the state biennium budget. And what we didn't want to do with biennium budget was feast and famine, which is what the universities live on. Year 1 is feast, get it all, spend every dime, let's get it out there. And year 2 is like, you're laid off and you're laid off. We'll come back, we'll get, come back in a year when we get another budget, we'll rehire you. So that is a potential pitfall of a 2-year budget. And we thought that a 1-year budget, if we could prove through a process that we can really hammer it out well for a few years, that then we could really have a chance to successfully look at a 2-year plan.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I think that while there are certainly potentially some attractions to a 2-year budget cycle, I think clearly we need to get our process fine-tuned and well-oiled so that it's working well for 1-year process or 1-year budget, because I think there's some training, as you alluded to, Director Richmond, training necessary so that people understand some of the pitfalls to a 2-year cycle. And so I think there's some training that would be required, but I think as an objective, I think it has value.
And the last thing that we discussed and did not bring as a recommendation was a 5-year prospectus from a third party on our finances. We did not necessarily think that was a bad idea. We just felt that this time, because of some other external factors, that this was not the time to really explore that process. We weren't 100% sure we would like the outcome. So we'd like us to, again, get to where we're maybe not great, but where we think we can do this on a replicating basis. And then we can start to add in these other aspects. So thank you for your time.
Again, I appreciate all the work that went into this presentation, the thoughtfulness. I think there's a lot of things that could happen to really improve this process. The idea of a written message from the BOC to the MTEAM in January, I like that. I think we usually have discussion during MTEAM meetings at that stage of the year about the fiscal outlook. And even though we usually have pretty good attendance at MTEAM, we seldom, if ever, reach 100%. And a consistent written message, I think, is a great idea. And I would further want to engage the budget committee on this. This is something I've been thinking about the last few years, and is greater engagement for the citizen members that, they come in at the beginning of the budget hearings and here's that document, and they really don't have any history or context about how the document was developed. And I think that might get better participation from our citizen members as well. Commissioner Hunt, anything else?
Yeah, last couple of comments. I like the idea of an outside document that is, I'll say, reader friendly. I'm guilty of, if I get a 10-page memo, I may not read the whole 10 pages. And so hopefully that document, that recognizing there's some cost, but there may be ways to minimize that, would be kind of a, I don't know, worksheet, or not a worksheet, but some kind of a brief document that points out what the budget is trying to do, what the budget has done. And I think that would be very valuable. And last comment is the alternative funding sources. I think I got that right. The only question I have there is the receipt of the final audit from our outside auditors. Is that a function? Is that a requirement before you're able to really sit down and discuss alternative financing sources, in an effort to avoid that situation where, gee, we got the audit, now we know the final ending figures for the prior year, now we know what we have to balance to? So that's more of a rhetorical question, in that I think that may be one of the factors that is a determinant of how successful that process can be.
Our goal, I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, go ahead.
Our
I'm done.
goal with the alternative funding sources was to move it was for us to not have magic moments, right? Where we got together and we found a problem. We couldn't come up with a solution as a group. Someone else finds a solution, but nobody really knows how that solution
Okay.
fell out, right? Which
Better
is
communication.
better communication.
That makes sense. That's all I have.
And that's all I have for now. Again, thank
Thank
you.
you. It's good to see full participation on your committee.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would like to take a very brief recess, less than 5 minutes, and our third and final committee, feel free to come forward and get set up.
Yeah, I'm wincing. Oh, I'll be, what? No, it happened Sunday. I was painting, so I had my readers on. I'm on the stairs at my daughter's house. I was like on the third stair and I looked down and I missed the second one and nosedived into the sidewalk below the stairs.
Okay.
Other than some bruises and scrapes, yeah. Yeah, I was afraid I'd have broken something.
Could have been bad.
Yeah.
Balls are always dangerous.
I mean, I could show you the scabs on my knees, but it's in a way a reflection of what happens with age, because it's the second time I've nosedived.
Oh, geez,
And
Doug.
I forget the prior situation. Oh, I know, I was stepping off a ladder. And I thought I was on the last step and I was on the second to the last step and I into the driveway, concrete driveway. And again, I thought, God, I'm lucky I didn't break an arm or something. So I haven't learned that.
Reflexes.
Well, apparently I haven't learned the lesson very well.
25 pounds. They're 7 years old. Stop my. Oh, wow.
So Christina, I don't know if we're being recorded or not, but, okay. Out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought I got a
Just try it.
splinter, but
You got a
actually,
sliver?
no, no. Apparently there is a slivered area, but it's covered up by a piece of tape.
Where's the sandpaper?
Yeah, really.
Having been painting over the weekend, I used a lot of sandpaper too.
I imagine.
Actually. Yeah, I just. No.
My father has a lot better story about when he bruised ribs. He and I were fishing and he stepped on a slippery rock.
Ow.
And bruised his ribs.
Ow.
That was a few years ago, though.
I've never, knock wood, had a rib injury. I hear, they can be excruciatingly painful.
Well, it grabs you. Oh,
Yeah,
they take-
I mean,
yeah.
you can't really
The ribs keep moving.
illuminate. Yeah, you can't really immobilize them.
Well, we'll try to keep the humor to a low.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I've added to the humor, so, I guess I have to take my own poison.
It could be humorous. You might find our.
Okay,
Okay, folks, are we ready to reconvene? Do we have everybody we need?
we're missing Tony.
Okay,
Where's Tom?
He was here.
Oh,
Tone.
is he showing us picture?
Cut out
He's
Tony,
cut
huh?
some too. Oh, and he's been showing. Yeah.
There's Tony.
All right. We'll reconvene, and again, our final panel, you've had the advantage of watching the first two. So remember the 20-minute guideline and introductions for the record. We're now reconvened and we'll hear from our third work group.
Good morning, glad to be here. Anno Husing, Director of Planning and Development.
Kristen Ewell, County Council.
Christina Sheriff, Finance Director.
Good morning, Joe Davidson, County Assessor.
Tony Campa, Community Justice Director.
Okay.
Thank you, commissioners. So go ahead and go to the first slide, Casey. We have the highly sought after topic of revenue streams. So we're going to be talking to you about that. So traditionally, local governments can raise revenue or receive their revenue in traditional ways, which is fees, taxes, and that includes levies. We have the transient room tax, for example, here in the county. And then county assets and investments. And that can include assets such as county parks. It can include leases and joint ventures with other entities. Next slide, please. So specifically, several departments are fee driven. So for example, our community and development department, Mr. Husing's department, highly fee driven. They issue licenses and development permits. Other ways are through fines. That's a pretty small revenue source. Typically, when we do code enforcement, we want compliance. We're not seeking to raise revenue in that fashion, nor does it for the county. So typically, property taxes, levies, and then other service taxes. So the transient room tax is an option. We did do some comparisons with other counties, other tourist areas, to look at the rate that they had, the transient room tax. We're pretty much in line with what other counties are, the base rate is, which is 10%.
Did you say what our rate is?
It is 10%.
10%?
Yeah.
Because I believe Lincoln City voted just recently to go to 12%.
Well, they're referring it to the ballot, but yeah,
That's right.
cities
Yeah.
have to refer it to the
Cities have to
ballot,
refer-
counties
we
don't
can,
have to.
do it by order
Correct.
or ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Thank
did
you.
learn that Deschutes County, I believe, is 10.5%. So there are different rates. I think Clatsop, I want to say, was around 9%. I think Mr. Davidson looked at this.
Clatsop is currently 10.5. They're the
Clatsop.
one that we looked at that's actually higher than us.
Okay. Now what about
On the
Deschutes?
unincorporated areas. Deschutes is actually 8%.
Okay.
And I think it's Tillamook. Let me check before I say that. Yeah, Tillamook is right in line with us at 10%.
So following up on my error, is Newport higher?
I believe Newport's also at 12%.
Yeah, that's where I got confused. So
Mhm.
fair enough. Thank you.
Newport is currently at 9.5%,
Oh, okay. Well,
and so is Lincoln City.
I think the proposals for Lincoln City to raise it.
Hmm.
The other
well, there
way.
might have been an
I-
erroneous news article because that said, I guess, that
Yeah.
said Newport was
You
at
and I
12.
must have read the same news
Yeah.
article.
And then just to clarify, these numbers that are from the Department of Revenue as of 11/19 of 21.
Mhm.
Okay, well,
So they should still. stand
I would
firm.
think.
Okay, so other options are through service districts. Over the decade, you've seen the passage of the animal service district. So there are different options for levies and services that you can raise revenue. Okay, next slide, Casey. So what are these options for intervention? So we did typically statutorily, you can look at fees twice a year. So the commissioners, we have a process by which we do that in July and then January of each year. Departments are tasked with looking at their services and the fees they're charging and how does this compare to similar jurisdictions. So that's something that is important that each department should stay on top of, ensure they are competitive, ensure that the services that they're providing is adequately reflected in the fees that they're charging. So other options are fees for convenience. So this is through the credit card option for payments to departments. I think everybody has gone to that is able, with the exception of a few departments that are currently transitioning. So that is an option. And then just again, we wanted to talk about the asset monetization. So the parks kept coming up again in our meetings that we feel the parks really should be capitalized on, meaning we can provide more services there. We need to look at the fee structure and ensure that we're being competitive just based on other jurisdictions. I think that probably needs to be closely looked at. Okay. Any other thoughts, you guys? We'll go to the next slide, Casey. So what are the strategies? The strategies are to identify, I guess, what streams and interventions would generate the revenue. And then also looking at the impact on stakeholders. So our group recognized the unpopularity and lack of success of recent levies that have gone to the ballot, including proposed sales taxes, including law enforcement levies. And so there are strategies, which includes education of the community. It includes how does this impact the stakeholders, meaning the communities. And so a lot of analysis needs to be done before this would be proposed and before this would actually go to the ballot or considered for the Board of Commissioners. Can you go to the next slide? So different processes. So looking at community acceptance, looking at the economic impact, and then how is this going to be implemented? So all of these factors need to be considered when looking at revenue sources and revenue proposals. Who is it going to impact? Is this going to mostly impact? I think that's been a criticism of proposed sales tax, is it impacts lower income residents typically. So that assessment needs to be done, as well as businesses and jobs. So these are just kind of factors, and then what kind of questions should be asked. Okay, next question or next slide. So some recommendations for the next step. There is a joint project called Rethinking Revenue Project. As you can see, it's a joint project with all these organizations. It creates thriving local communities and provides local governments with the ability to raise revenues for the services that they offer to the community, but it also raises it fairly and in a way that is consistent with community values. And so that's worth looking at, is this project. But our group agreed we need public support. You need to create an awareness, education of what you're trying to achieve. What services do you want to provide, and what is that going to cost? And that really needs to be done thoughtfully. So our proposal is to formulate an internal team. This could be department-based. It could be multi-departments based on maybe what you're trying to accomplish. And then that's all I have. Anybody else want to? Any questions?
I think it's just important to note that, some of these, we've tried to keep this fairly broad. And then in the future, maybe hone in on some of these sources depending on which way the county wants to go. And it's important to note that all of these, whereas some require voter approval, they should all include voter input, or community input, community feedback to determine fairness, to ensure fairness for these revenue streams, because the revenue is coming from somebody, and so we want to ensure that we get adequate feedback from any of these sources.
Commissioner Hunt?
I'll defer to you. Chuck,
Okay,
first.
well, no, I think this is a good blueprint for further exploration of new revenue potential. I think as an organization, we really haven't, set an expectation that we look at this and then constantly re-examine the options and opportunities. Every now and then I hear people in the public grumble that our fees are a way to generate extra money, and then they're surprised usually when I explain that none of our fees generates revenues beyond the cost of providing that service. And in most cases, it doesn't get to full cost recovery. So maybe that's something we should really ask, look at the community benefit, the individual benefit, and how much, if any of that, should be picked up by the general fund versus by the user. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Freudian slip indeed. Well, maybe I better shut up and let you speak, Commissioner Hunt.
Oh, I don't know. That sounds like I'm stepping into a quagmire. A couple of thoughts. First of all, I think one of the comments that was made is really critical to be remembered. And that is, I think if we're going to the voters and asking them for approval of a levy or some other increase in revenue for the county, first of all, we need to figure out what the message is as to the value. In other words, when I was on the school board, we were working on a levy and we thought, gee, if we talked about putting more teachers in classrooms, that was going to really sell to the public. Well, then we had some polling done. The public said, no, we're worried about technology. Well, okay, yeah, we're also going to be updating the technology and have state-of-the-art computers. And all of a sudden, the message changed and the value was identified by the voters, and that levy was ultimately passed. So I think the homework that we do before we go to the public and ask for their support is really a critical part of that. Couple other thoughts. I believe there is one or two cities that have a sales tax in Lincoln County. Yahats comes to mind.
Their food and beverage tax.
Food and beverage, yeah. So it's not a sales tax. It is a form of a sales tax.
Yeah, and Newport has a local gas tax, I think only in the summer months.
So there are some variations on a theme that might be of value to the county. And then the last thing I'll say is early on, I was asking several questions about the transient room tax. Tourism is our number one industry in this county. And I think the fact that generally speaking, the transient room tax is paid by visitors to our county, tourists to our county. I think that's worthy to note as we look at ways to generate revenue. So those would be my comments overall. I think the challenges are significant. And I appreciate the first steps that you've taken in trying to identify ways to enhance revenue, which ultimately benefits all of our citizens. So thank you.
And I echo Commissioner Hunt's comments. Thank you all. So we now bring Mr. Johnson back for next steps.
Before I begin, again, I want to thank the M team for all of the hard work on that today. I think it's evident in the presentations that you've seen.
Hard work not only today, but in preparing for today.
Yes, correct. Okay, so what do we do next? In the context of this chart lays out a variety of different steps for us moving forward. Throughout the rest of the fall of this year, we'll be working on the corresponding refinements of all the material that was presented here today, putting it into a work plan, a timeline, budgets and outcome and performance measures and metrics for you, as it will come forward with a series of recommendations. And I think you caught that. There's low-hanging fruit that can be immediately initiated, get your approval to undertake those activities. And then there is immediate short-term, mid and long-term activities. And then get your approval on that. And hopefully we can get that completed before the end of the year and into working into our budget and incorporating many of those things moving forward. So that implementation would start sometime in the winter and correspondingly as it relates to those that have a longer time frame and require further review and planning later into the spring and of course beyond. With that, one of the things that I think is always forgotten, and that is the evaluation process. Is it working? Do we see what our expectations were? Did we achieve those based upon time, budget, and other metrics? And I think that's one of the things that we need to be assured that the M team will bring forward to the Board of Commissioners. Next step, summary. You heard Jane Romero talk about this, and I think that the M team saw this. Well, we have an excellent mission statement and, no question about that. It's held up over a period of time and through a
Roughly 30
global-
years, I
Yeah,
think.
global
Yeah.
pandemic and a
Mhm.
couple significant recessions to boot. That's a real compliment to the organization. What we don't have, and I think is important for our overarching organization's effectiveness and efficiency, is a vision. And the difference obviously between a vision and a mission is what we do today. A vision is what we'd like to do someday. And you also heard Jane Romero talk about issues associated with core values. And I think that's real important. And the M team, I think, is understanding of that. And I think that is two of their next 3 steps that we'll be working on here. Will be the formulation of a vision and a formulation of core values. And I think that will really begin to lay the foundation for our organization moving forward. I think it is tantamount, however, that I provide the following. As we look at things that were identified today, no matter what happens, I think it's incumbent upon me to ensure that there exists the passion for all of our employees to continue to do their work. And if there is anything that concerns me the most about is to ensure that that environment exists for them. And whether that is through resolution of issues associated with budget, corresponding audit, corresponding revenues, it's very important to me to ensure that fact moving forward. Having said that, later next month, we have another workshop. That workshop is focused on the commons and the fairgrounds. And within the context of what we didn't present today in terms of revenue is something that I would like to tell you that we will be looking at how to monetize the construction, development, and subsequent redevelopment use of those facilities at the commons for our organization. And that will incorporate a whole host of things relative to our capital improvement plans as we move forward. So I intend to bring that to you and further information later in October. With that, I conclude and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions we have, but we have a busy schedule, as you can see in front of us with the M team and a variety of things to do and actions moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your presence, your participation, your hard work in getting ready for today's presentations. A lot of great food for thought, things that we'll need to absorb, think about, discuss, and act. Commissioner Hunt.
Yes, I would agree. I think this is a great first step. And I know it took a lot of time and effort on the part of the M team. And I think it reflected some passion. So I look forward to the next steps and thank you all for your hard work and commitment to the county and our people.
And before I adjourn, as I usually do at board meetings, I'll note the upcoming meetings of the Board of Commissioners. All of these begin at 10 a.m. in this room and are also available over Zoom. Tomorrow morning, August 24th, 10 a.m., the Board of Commissioners Weekly Public Business Meeting. Monday, the 29th, our weekly office staff meeting, and then the next Board of Commissioners meeting on Wednesday, the 30th.